Awesome time with God. There's nowhere better than spending time with God's presence. I love the feeling of just getting lost with Him because with God, there's no time. Isn't that exciting, eh? It's so exciting. Right, we've just had Christmas and many of us have a great time with the family. I've got my mother-in-law down the back. Hi, Lynn. Good to see you. Good to see Rob Mackey back. Where are you, Rob? Right there. I can see you. Good to see you.
Hey, nice to be on.
Awesome. Steve and Tara, good to see you both. I haven't seen you for a while. It's really cool. Simon's here. Hi, Simon. Good to see you. So cool. Good to see you, Casey. Yeah. So, many of us had a good time with family. Maybe some of us didn't have family time. Maybe there's others that are please say goodbye when the family leaves. It's commonly said that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. And that's true, isn't it? So there's so many different types of families around. I've been through Google to try and find some pictures of families that may look somewhat like yours or somewhat different to yours. There's this family here. I reckon Mark Simpson's hairdo was fashioned after that lady there. I'm just jealous because I haven't got much hair. You might have had a family that liked pets. We got a family that liked pets here. Look at that. Happy family. Pets make you happy. Oh, but anyway. Yeah. You may have had a family that liked pets. You may have been part of a small family. Or you may have been part of a large family. Look at this. 94 kids. 39 wives. One dad. That's in India, by the way. You can't do that in New Zealand, okay? But yeah, he's a construction worker. I don't know where he gets the energy to be a construction worker. You may have dreamed that you came from a family like this. The perfect family. It was actually quite hard to find a picture on the internet of the perfect family. So while I was looking for Google, before I found the perfect family, while I was typing in the perfect family, this family came up. I don't know why that came up under searching for the perfect family, but hey. And you may have also come from a family like this. The not so perfect family. Here's my family. Here's a picture of my family I grew up in. So pretty old. Here's me. I had hair in those days. So in a family, there's always going to be disagreements. And we would have all seen different ways they modelled as to how they were handled. I remember one year my sister decided to go mixed flatting. So that's girls and guys in the same flat. Back then, my parents were horrified. Because in their day, people might think that their daughter was sleeping around. And the Bible is clear that we need to avoid the appearance of evil. So they arranged to meet with my sister. My sister explained to them that in her generation, people didn't think there was evil at all. No one of her friends thought she was sleeping around. And she thought that if she moved out, her friends were probably thinking that she was over-righteous and stuck up, and she'd lose that friendship. And so a 2.5 to 3 hour conversation followed. It was deep and heartfelt. I know, because I was sitting there. But my parents didn't get called control freaks, and my sister didn't get labelled immoral. Both sides heard the other person's point of view and respected the other person, even though no side could agree with the other person's point of view. I don't think it really matters what the outcome was because both people respected and heard the other person's point of view, even though they didn't agree. So, we all got on pretty well, even though we had disagreements. We all got on pretty well, and I thought other families did too. I remember as I was a young boy bringing my home reader homework home, reading a story about a boy who didn't like his sister. And I thought, that's weird. I thought everyone liked their sister. My sister was cool. And so I was surprised. But the older I got, the more I realised that, in fact, there are all kinds of families out there. And hearing stories of the people here, I realised that many of you have experienced a very different family to mine. And here at the Oasis, we use words like church family. And we have words up to describe the culture that we want to bring here, that we want to welcome as family. And we want to demonstrate real love. But what does that mean? None of us have seen family modelled perfectly. And none of us have seen God's perfect love modelled perfectly. So it's not surprising that we have seen all kinds of behaviours in our families, in our workplaces, in our friendships, and at church. We've seen people yelling at each other. We've seen people telling each other a few home truths, which is really just an excuse to dump all our frustration and anger upon them. We've seen people using the stern bully voice to tell people off. And I'm not innocent of this stuff either. So, we've seen people seeing someone else's behaviours and then making up all kinds of stuff about how that person is controlling or how they're slack or whatever. And actually, we have no real reason or no real way of knowing why that person acted that way at all. So, how can we get closer to that perfect family that God intended? Here's my dream. I dream of families and churches where we all feel safe, where we're not worried about what people may say or think about us, where we can disagree without getting personal. We're a place where if I'm stuffing up somewhere, that someone will lovingly draw me aside and tell me, hey Steve, you're stuffing up here, you can do it better this way. That would be cool. And a family where we believe the best about each other. And it's achievable because God has so many promises, and He promises to transform us from glory to glory into the likeness of His Son, who was perfect and had no sin. And I believe we're pretty good at the Oasis about being a great family. And one thing I really like about our church is we're not at that awkward first stage where nobody talks about offences. We all put on a plastic mask. There's some places they put on a plastic mask and they never talk. But we talk. So, however that goes, we're going to learn, aren't we? About whether it gets better or whether that didn't quite go so well, and I'm going to make it better next time. So, I'm going to give you 2 tips today from the Bible that'll help towards that dream of a safe, loving family. And so the subject I'm talking about today is handling offences. And I'm not trying to get at anyone through this message, because believe me, we all get offended and we all offend others. It's just part of this fallen world, but hopefully this is helpful for everyone. So, it's a massive subject. I'm just doing 2 points. Point 1, I'm not going to give you my title just yet, otherwise it's going to ruin the intro for my title for point 1. So here goes. When someone offends us, what do we do? What's the first thing that we do when someone offends us? Anyone got any answers? Rob?
We get our back up.
We get our back up? Yeah, so what should we do when we get our back up? Anyone got any ideas? Anyone know what the Bible says?
Yeah.
We do? Mike, you got an answer for us.
Not give them empowerment over you for giving them the opportunity to make you feel that way.
Don't give them empowerment over you. That is a good answer. I'm going to talk a bit about that too. Oops. A bit about that. There's lots of good answers. Some of the, often a passage that we commonly talk about in this church, and we've commonly talked about in the past, is that passage in Matthew 18, where it talks about when someone offends you, the Bible says, go to them and sort it out. Let me read that passage. Matthew 18:15. If a brother sins against you, go privately and point out their fault. But there's also another thing that the Bible says before we do this. Matthew 7 comes before Matthew 18. And Matthew says that before we go and sort it out, listen to this. It says, get the speck out of your own eye first, the log out of your own eye first. Listen to this. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you used in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? Well, Jesus didn't pull any punches, did he? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite! First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. So the first thing we need to do before we go and see them is get rid of the log in our own eye first. Often we overreact and are furious about what someone did to us, and it's more because of the issues in our own life, not solely because of what just happened to us. This was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So the first thing we need to do is take some time alone with God and get the log out of our own eye. Find out why we're furious. Maybe just because they happened not to say hi to us. Does that mean I'm insecure about my identity? Do I have a rejection issue? Things that make us angry are great cues to issues we might have in our own life and need to sort out with God's help. So pray through them. And once the issue is cleared up, we usually don't feel angry anymore towards that person, or certainly nowhere near as angry. Then the Bible says we can see clearly to remove the speck out of the other person's eye. Then we can proceed to do the procedure in Matthew 18 and go and show the other person their fault. We've all seen far too many instances, I'm sure, of people who have gone to their brother or sister to show them their fault when they're still angry, and most of the anger is brewing from previous issues in their own lives that they haven't sorted out yet. And I'm sure we've all done that too. We must first remove the log from our own eye. How do we know that that log is removed? Usually the anger has gone, and now our motive is love for the other person. So it's not to vindicate myself or make them feel bad for what they did to me. It's love for them. Hey, this is going to help you see how you can do this better without hurting people. Have you ever heard the illustration, hurt people hurt people? I think Wapu's preached a sermon on it. If we can have that next slide. Yeah, there it is. I often think that this one here is more true, and it's a bit like what Mikey was talking about. If we can have the next slide. Hurt people hurt hurting people. Because if we're whole, we're less easily offended. So offences can be a signal that there's something wrong in my heart that I need to sort out. And I learnt this really clearly one time when I went to visit a friend of mine. And this friend of mine, I was shocked, told me, I'm going to censor the words he used. He told me to bleep off. And he was furious. But I wasn't offended in the slightest. Because I was visiting him in the mental health unit, and I knew he wasn't himself. I knew he was broken, and it didn't change my opinion of me, it didn't make me feel offended. And then I realised, I can take that lesson from what this person said to me, and I can use it in a whole lot of other situations. Why do I so much get offended when a lot of times what people say is more a signal of their brokenness? The only one whom I should let speak truth into my life about who I am is God. Because God's opinion of me matters, and He speaks the truth. And a lot of what other people say about me, I can, as Mike said, not give it power over me, not let it settle. Because a lot of what people say is an indication of their brokenness, and I can just let it wash off. So, it may not feel like it at the time, but when someone has accidentally hit a button in my life and got me all upset and angry, way out of proportion to what they've done to me, they've actually done me a favour, haven't they? By making me realise, hey, I've got an issue here. Something snapped at me, they hit me a button and I'm just feeling, they've done a favour by making me realise a button. So then I need to go away and sort out with God and get that log out of my eye, that thing in my heart, which is causing me a lot of pain. So, instead of going over there and blowing them up, go away. Once I've got the button sorted out, I may still need to go to them in love and make them see, or help them see, that what they said is not appropriate, so they can learn to be more tactful. Ephesians 4:15 says we have to speak the truth in love. So when we go to them and show them our fault, our motive has to be love. Cool, so that was point one about handling offences. sort out me first, get the log out of my eye. So point one, my attitude towards myself when an offence happens is, okay, God, what's going on with me? What has hurt me? So that's my attitude towards myself. Now I'm going to speak about an attitude I can have towards the other person. Point two. Love always hopes. That's my attitude towards the other person. Hope. 1 Corinthians 13:7. Whenever someone says something or does something that hurts us or lets us down, we never have perfect information about the situation. There are always things we don't know, and thoughts pop into our mind to fill the blanks. Now these thoughts may be just us, or they may be from God's Spirit or from the devil. The Bible says that the devil is always accusing us day and night, and he's the father of lies, and it's often negative thoughts that we get to fill in the blanks. Let me give you an example. Let's say Lisa doesn't come to our birthday party. She doesn't phone to apologetically explain why, and she doesn't even send me a text. So we fill in the blanks, don't we? She couldn't be bothered. She doesn't care. See, I'm filling in the blanks, aren't I? Maybe I'm a loser. I bet you Lisa thinks I'm a loser. She didn't even want to let me know why she didn't come. And we get into this negative spiral and start feeling bad towards Lisa and bad towards ourselves, and it's all based on our mind filling in the blanks. Now, because the Bible says love always hopes, so what should we think? Oh, Lisa's an awesome person. Maybe there's some good reason why she's not here. Maybe her phone is flat and she's stuck in traffic. And sure, we might be disappointed that she's not here, but we don't get all these negative feelings building up towards Lisa because she's this, because we always hope. Rather than filling in the blanks with negative judgment, the biblical attitude to have towards the other person is love always hopes. 1 Corinthians 13:7. Speaking of love, it's saying this: it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Here's an explanation of love always hopes, or love hopeth all things, according to King James Bible. And these notes are from the Cambridge Bible for schools and colleges. And this explanation's got two parts. The first part of the explanation is hope towards humans, and the next part is hope towards God. So, this is how they word it. Hopeth all things of man, of whom love will ever hope the best, and deem reformation possible in the most hardened offenders. In simple English, it means this: love always hopes the best of people and considers anyone can change. And the notes continue: oh, the hope of those who are freshly in love. They always believe the best about this person that they've only just met and fallen in love with. Isn't that true? You think, oh, they're just amazing. You know, even if they're not there, or things, you know, they just fill in the blanks with all these lovely things about this other person because they are in love. And then the definition of hope of God, that he will bring good out of evil, and that all the evils of this life will ultimately result in the triumph of good. We have tremendous hope as Christians that God will work all things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So love always hopes has these two parts, that we always hope towards God because we know he can work all things together for good, and we always hope towards other people. The lesson of love always hopes, or love always believes the best, really hit home to me when I had a milking job over the Christmas holidays one year. You had to get up early, well, it was early for me in those days, at 5 a.m. Luke often helps me with that now, which was very early for me in those days. And you're milking 440 cows, putting on cups after cups after cups. But there are a few cows that you don't put cups on, and these are the cows that have an udder infection and they've been treated with antibiotics to heal the infection. And you don't put that in with the main milk, because if the antibiotics get in the main milk, they kill the good bacteria that they use to make yogurt and cheese. So you don't want that milk going to the dairy, into the dairy factory. But you still have to milk that cow because If she stops producing milk, then she stops for the rest of the season. So you still milk the antibiotic-treated cow, but that milk goes into a special bucket and it's fed to the calves. Anyway, one morning I was particularly sleepy and missed the markings on the udder to tell me to put that milk from her into the special bucket. So I put it into the main vat. Oh no, it really stink. But I knew I had to tell the other worker, the chief worker, let's call him Bob, that I'd made a mistake, and I did. He said, oh, don't tell the herd owner, it'll be all right. To me, that didn't seem the right thing to do. I believed it was important to be honest and own up to my mistakes. Anyway, I kept quiet and didn't discuss it with him further. A short time later, I was with the herd owner, and I felt I needed to tell him the truth. I told him that Bob had said we shouldn't tell him, but I felt that telling you was the right thing to do, that I needed to own my mistake. The herd owner said it would be okay because just one antibiotic cow amongst 440 cows, the antibiotics would be so low that it wouldn't trigger a bad result in the test and the milk would be okay. That evening I heard the herd owner ripping into Bob for trying to cover up the mistake. Then Bob comes out shortly later when there's just the two of us, and Bob asks, what did you tell the herd owner? I told him that I felt I should tell him the truth, we shouldn't cover it up. Bob told me nicely. The reason I told you not to bother telling him was because that just one cow with antibiotics amongst 440 cows gives us a low test result and it'll be fine. We didn't need to bother him with telling him. But now the herd owner doesn't trust me and my relationship with him is damaged. And I felt terrible. I had assumed that Bob had a bad motive for keeping it quiet. But he didn't. He just knew that it wouldn't affect him. Don't bother telling him. Why cause him any consternation? But now, because of my assumptions, and not believing the best about him, I had damaged that relationship. I really learned my lesson that time. And so instead of covering Bob, instead of trusting him, instead of asking why he said don't tell, I had just assumed. And so I really learned love always believes the best, always hopes. But if we always hope, if we always believe the best, does that mean that love is naive? What if I always trust what people say? If I always hope that what they say is right and that always everyone has my best interests at heart, then if I'm wrong, won't I get hurt sometimes? Let's take an extreme example of this. Should a victim of domestic violence keep hoping that her partner won't smash her up again another night? Should she just do nothing and stay in that violent relationship and just keep hoping? Is that true love? No. Because we've got to consider the whole verse, don't we? Love, it starts off with love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And we should love ourselves. Mark 12:31 says we should love ourselves. So that means I should protect myself. If I love myself, I should protect myself. And true love sets boundaries. God is love and he sets boundaries. In fact, God has very firm boundaries that no sin comes into heaven. So, and no, because love disciplines. True love disciplines. True, and that's Hebrews 12:6, God disciplines us. True love gives consequences for wrong behaviour. So love is not naive. When we're considering love always hopes, we've got to put it in context of the whole description about love. One final point about love always hopes is that God always hopes. Love always hopes. The Bible says that God is love. So by inference, we know that God always hopes. Isn't that exciting? We see this real clear in Jeremiah 26, verses 2 and 3, where God is hoping that this time the wayward nation of Israel would turn back to him, even though he's warned them through many prophets for decades to come back to him. God said to Jeremiah in verse 2 and 3 of chapter 26, "Stand in the courtyard of the Lord's house and speak to all the people in the towns of Judah who come to worship at the house of the Lord. Tell them everything I command you. Do not omit a word. Perhaps they will listen and each turn from their evil ways. Then I will relent and not inflict upon them the disaster that I was planning because of the evil they have done. Do you hear God's heart of hope in that verse? He's tried and tried to reach them. He knows their hard hearts. Yet God, believing the best and having a heart of hope towards his people, is saying, perhaps this time they will listen. Perhaps this time they'll learn. God is hoping again and again that they will turn. And who better to tell a story about how God always hopes than Jesus, who was God in the flesh? Jesus tells a story recorded in Luke chapter 15 about a wayward son. I know this is Wapu's favourite story. And that wayward son represents us. And there's an amazing father who represents God. So we have to remember that the purpose of the story is Jesus is trying to illustrate God's character and heart for those who are lost and have gone away from him. In the story, the son doesn't like the lifestyle offered to him by his father, working at home for his dad on the farm. So the son asks the father for the share of the estate now, rather than waiting for his dad to die. And goes off, and the Bible says, wastes all his money in wild living. Then there's a famine, and the son can only get the worst job out for a Jew, and he doesn't have enough to eat, and finally comes to his senses and thinks, flip, things were better for my dad's servants at home. I'll go back and tell Dad, I've wronged you and I've wronged God. I'm not worthy to be called your son anymore. Just make me like one of your servants and take me back. Then I want to pick up this story in verse 20 of Luke chapter 15. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and filled with compassion for him, he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And remember, the purpose of this story is to illustrate the character of God. So why would Jesus go into the trouble of adding in the detail, while he was still a long way off, the father saw him, if it was just a fluke that the father saw him a long way off? No, I believe that Jesus adds this detail in because it was the father's character to keep looking out for his lost son. You don't keep looking out for someone if you've given up hope of them ever returning. Yet the father kept looking out regularly for his lost son because he always hoped he would return. And I can imagine the dad every day slowly climbing the stairs to the flat roof of his house, wandering over to the edge and looking down the long dusty road, always hoping that today would be the day that my son comes home. Day after day there's no one, or it's someone else. But one day he sees a very familiar silhouette, and the way he walks is unmistakably his son. But his shoulders are no longer back, and his head is no longer upright. He's kicking stones along the road, and he's a broken man. But he's my son, and the father can't bear to see him broken like that anymore. And he runs down the stairs, and we pick up the story in verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son. He threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost, but now he's found. Let's celebrate. So the son, who was as good as dead to his father, had returned home. Do we have a heart like God's, who always believes the best? Do we have a heart like someone in love, who always hopes the best for the other person, even though we don't know all the details? So let me summarise. I invite Sonia to come up, get ready to play. 2 key attitudes when I get offended. Firstly, my attitude towards myself. Do I take the log out of my own eye first? Do I go to God and check myself out first and say, God, is there any issue in me that caused me to get offended? Secondly, my attitude towards others. Am I believing the best about them? Or have I filled in a whole lot of blanks with a whole lot of negatives? Do I have an attitude of love that always hopes towards them? Let's just take some time to reflect. You might want to close your eyes and just see, God, what have you been speaking to me about today through this message? Because God will speak as we give him time. Let me encourage you to talk to God about what he's saying to you as he listens. Just while you're praying, I just want to put a special call out. Maybe there's someone here who knows that they are like that lost son. They've been away from God and they know that God is calling them back today. If you want to come back to God today, or you want to know more information about how do I come back? How do I come back? How do I find the way home? If you want to do that today, feel free to give me a wave. Anyone wants to do that? Cool. Maybe if you don't have courage to put your hand up, you can see me after the service, or see Kevin, or see someone whom you know knows God and you trust their opinion. I'm just going to invite Kevin up to close the service. And those people who put their hands up can catch up with me after the service. That'd be awesome.